Hello and welcome to the Amazing Studios Production Podcast. My name is Peter.
And I'm Cliff Bubgardner.
And Cliff, we missed a week.
We did.
What happened?
We're terrible people.
We are horrible people.
We're horrible. Actually, we were busy. We were flying all over the country for a week and didn't have any time here to actually record a podcast. So we missed our episode last week.
So we were in 6 states in 5 days. Is that right?
Yeah, something like that.
It was absolutely insane.
It was a long week. But we're back this week, and to make up for our absence last week, we brought a special guest with us this time.
Yeah, we have Mr. Jeremiah Berkheimer.
Oh, hello there.
Jeremiah, you've heard us talk about him before. He is our animator here at the studio and a really awesome guy. So we're glad we finally drug him onto the podcast because it took a while to get him.
It did take a little bit of dragging, that's for sure. So I want to talk first, I guess, about what we've watched, because we actually have some exciting things to talk about that we would have loved to talk about last week when we could have, been ahead of the curve. But we got busy. And okay, so the best part, last week. So it's, I guess, Thursday. We're supposed to have a podcast out the next day, and Brandon, the producer, calls me up. And he says, "Hey, I know you guys are flying to Baltimore. Do you guys think you could record a podcast on the plane?" And I think the guy has never flown before because, plane rides, they're loud, they're noisy, and we were right next to the engine. It would not have been ideal.
And just so you guys know, Peter is talking about Brandon as if he's not here when he is exactly 3 feet away at the end of the table, able to shoot Peter at any time, so he should be careful. Yeah. But if we're going to talk about what we've been watching, we should be gracious hosts and let Jeremiah go first.
Yes.
Oh, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, let's talk about that. What have you been watching lately?
Well, since it's Halloween's coming up, I use this as an excuse to watch twice as much horror films, which is just really sad because I start running out of horror films and I start getting into like Lifetime movie horror films, and I try and find something good out of them.
That's That's horrifying in and of itself.
It is, but I still try and find the best part of them. But lately, I've just been going back to my favorite classic horror films, which for modern films, usually Asian horror film, like Old Boy, or or any foreign film like Martyrs. I'm gonna watch that one with Cliff this Halloween.
Yeah, I'm excited.
The most disturbing horror film I've ever seen, but so beautiful. So stuff like that. And then of course you got to go back to your American slashers. 70s and 80s. You can't mess up with a good slasher. For the Halloween.
Do you have a particular favorite from that era?
If I had to go with like an overall favorite, Friday the 13th series, definitely. Good. Halloween has a good feel to it. Nightmare on Elm Street is what I kind of grew up watching.
Yeah.
I had weird parents.
Yeah.
But Friday the 13th just has like that nostalgia feel you can't get back, which is why I hate remakes. Because they're trying to remake something that is perfect because of its time. But with these turds, what do they know?
Yeah.
They just want the money, and they're going to ruin a good art form, which I consider horror to be the best art form for you directors out there.
He's throwing down.
Oh, so tell us why.
You want to know why?
I want to know why.
Keep on talking, and it's going to just ruin your whole podcast.
Actually, let's save that because our topic today is horror, so I'd love to get into that here in a minute.
Yeah, so we'll come back to that.
Sounds exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Peter, you and I actually have the same what we've been watching.
Actually, let's split it up.
Really?
Let's each take a Sorkin film, because we both watched the same 2 Sorkin films.
True.
Why don't you take the first one, California?
Yes. Well, as we mentioned last week, we were really busy and we were all over the place, and we had the opportunity to go to Los Angeles for about less than 24 hours, I think, in the end, to go out and do a really quick shoot with a gentleman out there. But while we were in town, we had some free time, and we were looking for something to do. And we realized, Peter remembered actually, that Steve Jobs, which had not yet come out nationwide, was in limited release out there. There were 2 theaters in Los Angeles that were playing it. I looked it up, and one of them was the ArcLight, which is a theater I've always wanted to go to. I hear about it. Yes, it was a beautiful, beautiful place. If you've never been, the ArcLight is gorgeous. It kind of feels like old school cinema in a way, because it's very grand. And when you sit down to watch the movie, an usher comes out and talks to you about the movie and tells you who's in it and what to expect and who directed it, and it's a great experience.
Yeah, instead of the cheesy, the exits are located here and here and here being played on the screen on some roller coaster thing that you'll see at a Regal Theater. The guy comes in and he's actually like in a suit.
Right.
And, he points out the theaters. He tells you he's going to be in and out of the theater every 15 minutes to check the quality of the film. It really had a great nostalgic almost 1950s feel.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to go up a grand staircase to get to the theaters. Like it was funny. You'll appreciate this, Jeremiah. I was going up the staircase and there was this girl walking next to me and she goes, "I guess these stairs are my punishment for trying to be lazy and watch a movie tonight." And I was like, yeah, don't they know that all we want to do is sit and eat popcorn and watch something and they're going to make us walk upstairs before we can get to it? This is really mean.
Yeah, that's rude. That's
they should know their audience better than that, don't you think? But
we're also going to leave this as a positive review on the ArcLight for helping people to get off their butts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they exercise you before you go in and sit for 2.5 hours. But so we went to see Steve Jobs, which now, of course, has come out nationwide and it has bombed, which we'll talk about shortly. But at the time, we didn't really know anyone who had seen it. It had been making the rounds in the festivals and had been doing very well in limited release. And we were pumped to see it, and I was blown away. I thought it was a phenomenal film. I love Aaron Sorkin, and this is one of his best scripts in my estimation. I mean, it's brutal, it's fast, it's if you love his dialogue, this is just 2 hours of nothing but his amazing dialogue. It's a very structured film in an interesting way. We had heard going in that it was the whole movie is set around 3 product launches, and that's exactly what it is. And it's really no more, no less than that. It's 3 product launches, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, tells the entire story. And Steve Jobs, played by Michael Fassbender, who I thought did an incredible job, has interactions with like the same 6 people 40 minutes before every product launch. And that's the movie. I've never really seen a movie be structured quite in that obvious of a way, but what it did was it made it kind of feel like a play. And it just allowed the actors and the writing to play in between that time and do whatever they wanted.
So you're saying it was better than Ashton Kutcher, who played like young hippie who just fell into tech?
I know it's a controversial statement, but I think it is.
Yeah. I mean, walking out of the theater, your comment to me probably sums it up best. Oscars all around.
Yeah.
The one scene, and I'm not going to give away the movie, but there was one scene where there's a high amount of tension between Jobs and Scully. And it felt like an action adventure scene, like a high-speed car chase, but all it was 2 men in a hallway talking. My heart was racing, and at the end of it, at the end of that scene, I turned to you and I said, "I've never felt this way before watching dialogue."
Yeah, it was truly incredible. And Danny Boyle, man, it's some of the weirdest choices in directing that I've seen. He really goes all over the map with the movie, but it works. It feels coherent. It feels like it's one piece, even though the style is changing and he's incorporating all sorts of graphics and all sorts of new stuff, and it's really wild what they did with the film. But I thought it was a wonderful film. I think come Oscar time, we're going to see a lot of attention for it. It's unfortunate that it's not really a commercial film.
No.
And it completely bombed.
Yeah.
Not doing well. Last I heard, they're going to try to limp it along until Oscar season, hoping they get the Oscar boost to really make something out of it.
Yep.
But yeah, I highly recommend especially if you're a filmmaker. If you love great story and great dialogue and just great craft, I highly recommend you go see it. It's well worth your time.
And on the directing side, you and I have kind of grumbled a little bit about some recent films who have not been consistent with the action axes, have not been consistent with screen direction, and sacrificed continuity for fancy moves.
Right.
This film had all the fancy moves that you're going to find in any film, but continuity, screen direction, and the action axes were solid.
Yeah, they were pitch perfect.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. I want to talk. First off, for anybody who's listening, we are live on Periscope and Meerkat right now. We've started receiving a few questions from people who are listening, and so we're going to get to those questions here in just a little bit. So stay tuned. We are going to answer those questions. The one that I'm excited about is getting Jeremiah's take on what the scariest movie ever is. So be thinking about that because somebody in our audience wants to know. I want to talk about Moneyball.
Yes.
I sat down last night to watch that at your recommendation. It's another Sorkin script.
it was one that's been on both of our lists forever.
Oh,
I
yeah.
finally saw it about a week ago.
My thoughts on Moneyball is wow.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It is a film it's a movie about the side of baseball nobody wants to think about.
It's a baseball movie that's hardly about baseball.
Right.
You don't see baseball till the very end, really.
Yeah.
I don't like baseball at all, but I love that movie.
Yeah.
And so, I sat down, I got to digest it. People who've been listening a long time know I have a 2-month-old at this point, and he was having a rough night last night, so it was a lot of start and stop. But in the midst of that, we got all the way through it, and it's a powerful film.
Mm-hmm.
Some really strong performances. Jonah Hill and Brad Pitt both deliver, I think, defining roles in that film, and the direction was actually such it felt gritty. But not gritty at the same time.
Right.
Not like a Fincher gritty or like a horror film gritty. It felt more of this is real, and I'm watching this.
And partially, I think that's due to Wally Pfister being the DP, who has such a gritty, visceral style to just all of his images. Even though that movie is very kind of still in the way it's filmed, it still feels very powerful and gritty, and it feels like a Wally Pfister or Chris Nolan movie.
Yep. The from a DP side, the one thing that really stood out to me was actually the lighting. The lighting in that film was above average. Everything was modeled. I couldn't always pick out where his lights were, but I could tell that everything was lit.
Yeah.
And it looked really nice.
The opening in the baseball stadium, that is just a gorgeous sequence.
It is.
The lighting and the just cinematography in the sequence is
And he did something
perfect.
that I typically dislike, but I really liked it in this one, and that was their closing shot is Brad Pitt in the truck, and he's driving towards the Oakland A's stadium, and all it is probably for the last minute and a half of the film is alternating shots from the passenger seat watching him drive, and it was all handheld, which is typically what I dislike. I dislike handheld in a car because it's so bouncy. But for some reason in this one, they built the momentum of the film so much, they built the arc of the film so much, that his life was in honestly so much tumult at this point that it felt appropriate. And I really did. I appreciated that final touch.
Well, and it felt very simple, which I think is what it needed there, because it's a very grand movie, and to end on such a simple, quiet note. Fun fact about that movie that I was reading: the song that his daughter sings to him in the film, that's not in the script. In the script, she plays guitar for him, and he buys her the guitar for Christmas. When that actress auditioned, she sang that song in her audition, and the director loved it so much he decided to put it in the movie. The funny thing is, though, that movie takes place in, I believe, 2002?
2002.
The song that she sings didn't come out until 2008. So it's actually an anachronism in the film, but the director thought she did such an incredible job that he put it in.
I thought of that because Apple actually used that song in like 2009 in one of their iPod marketing campaigns. They used that song, and I remembered it. So I did catch that, but it didn't pull me out of the film at all.
Yeah, no, not at all. It's just kind of an interesting little Easter egg, though.
Yep. All right, let's get to our main topic today. Our main topic is horror.
Yes.
We're going to have this out. The 30th is when this will be released, and so it's going to be right before Halloween. For anybody who doesn't know, you should check out today, if you're listening today, check out our Facebook page, because we're going to have all kinds of costumes and crazy antics from the studio.
And also, Jeremiah just put out a new piece. You want to talk about that?
Yeah.
So I love horror films. That's my favorite of all time, like I said. But usually the association with that is that you are you wear all black and you just hate everything about life. You know?
So that you're me, basically.
Yeah, you're Cliff.
Yeah.
But I have a very cartoon personality.
That's actually the best description of you I've ever heard.
Yeah, it's sad, but it is.
It's appropriate for an animator, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use my 2D, 3D animation skills to combine the two. So I made a animation about how to pun off monsters. So just bad jokes, puns. Like steak to the heart is what you would think. It's a raw steak. You just slap it on the heart. That kind of cheesy jokes.
My favorite was the silver bullet.
Oh yeah.
And that it was a Coors Light instead of a bullet.
Yeah, the Silver Bullet Band, Bob Seger.
Yeah.
Everybody loves Bob Seger.
And tell us how much you loved making it vertical.
Oh, and yeah, it was a first attempt at making a vertical video. I did it as a test, and I wanted to love it so much because Peter hates everything about vertical video. And I loved designing for vertical video just because it was new. But then you put it on the internet, and the internet just farts all over it. That's the best way I can describe it.
Well, and it's not so much that, because we got a lot of compliments actually on the fact
Yeah.
that it was a vertical video. A lot of our peers watched it and were like, wow, you guys are taking the art form and you're taking risks.
Yeah.
But you still hate it. Why do you hate it?
Just because of how the internet works and how many different screen sizes and different, like, it just doesn't look good when you put it on the internet, unless if you're watching it on your phone full screen. And so you're asking people to, like, watch in a very specific way, and nobody wants to, like, go out of their way to watch it that, like that. So
Right.
in the end, it just, like, half of the people or more will see it in this weird way with these giant black boxes on the side. And you lose all the beautiful little details I put in there. Just saying. So overall, I think it's garbage, and I think vertical video won't be the wave of the future, as people are saying. Because I think as we go on, we're going to have crazy screen sizes that nobody will understand and will ever be able to match. So once we come up with responsive videos, though, somehow, I don't know.
Well, have you seen those 360 videos on YouTube?
Oh yeah,
That's probably the closest thing.
Those are crazy. I don't know how well those will work either. I think that might also be a fact because it's also asking people to do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, and one of the tenets that we bring as filmmakers to what we do is that we believe we need to be showing the audience what they should be looking at when they should be looking at it.
Right.
And in all those experimental media types, you're asking the audience to choose what to look at.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be disheartening because it's going to be harder to pick up on the story and harder to pick up on the intention of the person creating, because now my brain and my eyes go to so many places. I don't know what the focal point is.
Yeah.
And it's much harder to be subtle in that medium. Whereas when you're controlling a frame, you can weight a frame in a certain way to tell the audience something without actually having to tell it to them. Whereas when you're doing something like a 360 or even vertical to an extent, you lose a lot of that ability. So you kind of have to be more blatant. And I think that takes some of the craft away. That's why a lot of these experimental mediums I haven't been super interested in either, just because it just seems like a fad. It doesn't seem like an actual progression of anything.
Yeah, because editing is what makes something tense or suspenseful, and you have no editing in these kind of films, or I won't call them films. I'll call them videos because it's whatever. So yeah, if you want to look away from the actor, you can stare at a wall for 3 hours if you want. So
Right.
That's yeah, it's kind of garbage.
So
but
can you make a round video next with the Motorola watch?
I will not go. I am not touching another format that is not horizontal. That is it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Famous last words on that one.
Unfortunately, at some point, someone is going to try and make that into a thing.
We're all too young to say that for the rest of our lives we'll be working on horizontal video.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be dead by then, and by that I mean like probably next year. So.
Well, you do eat at Cookout a lot, so that could happen.
I do.
So speaking of death, that's a great transition to two things. One, I want to touch on this question we got first. What's the scariest movie ever?
What I consider, I don't get scared by horror films, just because I appreciate them so much. I don't know. I just stare them down, and I'm like, oh, they did this beautifully. So my definition of scary for horror is just anything that makes you feel just so bad or sad for the character.
It's dread.
Yeah, basically. And I would say Old Boy is that movie for me. That changed my life when I seen it. Not the new crappy one with Elizabeth Olsen. We didn't need a remake of it, but they made it anyways, which was sad and pointless. But if you watch the original one, it is just one of the most mind-blowing endings I've ever seen in a film, because in that movie, like in horror movies, the stake is these people are gonna die if they don't get out of this or whatever, and that's the highest stake. This movie, death seemed like nothing for this guy. It was like if he just dies, that is like he's winning in this game. Yeah, so Old Boy is just such an amazing cinematic experience that I think even if you're not a horror fan at all, it is something you should check out just to see get that amazing experience. It'll make you feel like garbage for quite a while, but you'll love it for that reason. So
I'm really pumped. As Jeremiah said earlier, on Halloween we're having like a horror movie night, and I've never seen Old Boy, so I'm really excited to get to see that.
Yeah, we're gonna watch Old Boy, and then we're gonna go to Martyrs, which makes you feel so awful for a whole nother reason, which I don't even want to talk about because I want Cliff to just start crying when he sees it.
And Martyrs is French, correct? Isn't that what we found out?
Yeah, it's French, but he incorporates 3 different styles of horror films all into one movie.
Ooh.
And it's so beautiful and seamless, and it's just like the story is so great. So people, if they can't stand some gore, then it turns them off, but they're missing out on this great experience and story. So, and I think that maybe there's a third one we're going to watch.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
If time allows.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And it's not Halloween? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we had talked about, for me, on the subject of horror, and this, I don't really consider this a horror movie. I consider this a Halloween movie, but my Halloween movie is Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
Because it's a movie that represents the spirit of Halloween. It's like the movie itself feels like a haunted house. Like it just feels like an overly theatrical, fun, off the wall kind of experience that I love, and I watch it every Halloween just because it represents the season to me.
Yeah.
It feels like it has that little bit of the magic of Halloween from when you were a kid, of like, oh, the ghosts are roaming the street tonight and all that, except they really are.
Yeah.
In that movie. And there's actually, and things like all of your rules of Halloween are punishable by death if you blow out your jack-o'-lantern too early, if you don't give away candy to kids, if you whatever, you get a visit from Sam the Halloween demon, and it's a completely over-the-top ridiculous movie, and I love it so much.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to get to watch that too. But talking about horror, you and I were actually talking the other day. You found an article that both made you inflamed and at times fairly happy. Was that AV Club?
Yeah. AV Club posted an article of top 25 horror films since 2000, and because I have this, I'm a huge fan of mostly all horror films from like the 70s and 80s. A lot of that has to do with nostalgia, of course, the film grain, but they just had it right then. Because they had low budgets, they just really had to work, everything had to be smart. They cared about the story and really getting that feeling down. It was just so raw. Whereas today, like from 2000 and on, it just kind of started losing what the meaning was. When it's like stuff like CGI started becoming popular, and I love CGI when it's for certain genres, but horror it should never be in. Because it takes away like stuff like Jim Henson even used to do horror films,
right?
Stuff like House, which was
The Dark Crystal could be defined as a horror film.
Yeah, and they're great because it had that raw, great feeling to it. But now CGI kind of took away from it, and we just and this is only for American horror directors, is that we became lazy at doing horror because we're just like, oh, well, we don't know what to do now, so just do a jump scare.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah, basically. We'll just cut, do a loud sound, and something popped up right there. And and if you look at somebody's, reaction of the film, it's just like there's a peak, low, peak, and the peaks are just where the people are being, jump scared.
Right.
And so it's such a cheap thrill, whereas, if you watch, if you go to watch, a French film or an Asian films today are just amazing because they're focused more on actual story that is making you feel. So it has this constant gradual build that is just to terror, and then it just leaves you up at top. And one of my favorite, Takashi Miike, this list made me happy because it had him at number 1 for Audition, and Audition was great because it seems like a love story the first half of it. But it's still intriguing, and you're, as a horror fan, you're like, what is this about? Why am I watching this love story? But you're still into it, and it's just he just knew how to really build that character, and it just ends with one of the most horrific scenes ever, and it's just like it wouldn't have been so great if it wasn't for that, like the way he toyed with your emotions, which was just love story with some slight things, you know, maybe going awry, kind of like you know, David Finch does. You know, David Lynch does like some weird stuff to you that just makes you feel weird when
Right.
you're watching something for whatever reason. But the thing that made me mad about this list was the 2 movies before that. So number 2 and 3 on the list was The Babadook and It Follows. And the reason for The Babadook...
2 very popular recent films.
It is, yeah.
It's worth saying.
And yeah, they're very popular. But I think the thing I don't understand is Babadook is very much a jump scare kind of thing. It's not very original. It's shot well, I'll give it that, but that is, at the end of it, you just felt like you went through a drive-through theater, or drive-through, like, restaurant of
Right.
cheap thrills. And It Follows had so much promise, and it was trying to be nostalgia, but also be like Little Miss Sunshine for horror films, which was its downfall, because it's like, oh, look at these angsty teens, which is a like great part of like 70 horror films and slashers, but then they just like keep watching these angsty teens, and like that's it, and they just took a great idea and story and just kind of made it too hipster or indie, and it just ruined it. So it made me mad that they're high up when like Martyrs was number 25 on the list, which I've talked about plenty lately because I love it so much. But they sprinkled in some good ones there.
I thought Let the Right One In wasn't nearly high enough.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
I think that's a great film.
Yeah, that movie was so great that they made an American remake for it that was shot for shot the same.
And what's telling is the American one's actually pretty good.
Yeah.
That's how good the original is, that when you copy it, you still make a good movie.
yeah. It's just frame for frame. They're just like, people don't want to read subtitles.
They don't want people talking to them in accents.
Yeah, exactly. And it was...
What's that weird Horgy Borgy Swedish chef nonsense going on over here?
Yeah, so that's another case. It's like, we're not doing horror films justice in America, right?
Right.
There is few, like Eli Roth, I think is doing pretty great, but only because he does it as tribute films. So like his latest Green Inferno was a tribute to a very controversial movie called Cannibal Holocaust, and like Cabin in the Woods, which is one of...
I love Cabin in the Woods.
That was great. And it was because they took the horror comedy aspect and took a lot of tribute to just all the great, like, Evil Dead and like,
Right.
Hellraiser and all these great films. And, of course, Joss Whedon, you know.
And it was also kind of a satire of where American horror is at, where they threw you every bone that you expect and that your average audience wants to see, and then they just started twisting them. They just used that as the groundwork, and then they twisted you at every turn until by the end, that's one of the most absurd movies I think I've ever seen, but it's great.
Yeah, it was great.
So then question, the big one in theaters right now is Crimson Peak. Have you seen it?
I have not seen it.
Okay. Why not?
To me, it looks like something I wouldn't be interested in. You can kind of tell from a trailer how they kind of sell it. Whether it's going to be worth your time or not, if you watch enough horror films. Even though I will go see it, I know I will, because I do this for every horror movie. I'm like, I'm not gonna like it. I'm gonna be mad when I go see it. So, no, screw this. And then I break down. And I'm like, well, I gotta prove myself if I'm right or not.
Here's the good news for Crimson Peak, and I'm trying to go see it later this week, is that, one, a lot of my filmmaker friends have been saying they haven't seen a movie like this made in the last 50 years. So it seems to be hearkening back to maybe a better time in American horror. But secondly, your standard modern horror movie audience isn't really catching on to it from what I've seen. A lot of people feel like, oh, it's too slow, or it's too much of a love story, or it's too much of all the elements that you've kind of just said that you think can have built some of the best horror are what people are having as problems with this one, which to me is usually a good sign that maybe it's actually doing something and people aren't getting it. And I have a lot of faith in Guillermo del Toro. He's a fantastic director, and
he is great.
Who's done a lot of great stuff, and who has a real love of horror and of monsters. Like the monster genre in horror or fantasy or anything is just like his deal. He has a great book series, if you never read it, called The Strain, that he wrote with Chuck Hogan. It's now a television series on FX, I think. It's their take on vampire lore. That is one of the most riveting horror books I've ever read. And it's partially because Del Toro just cares so much about even the anatomy of a monster. How would a monster work? How does this virus spread? What is the logic behind all of this? And he builds that into something really interesting. So I'm excited for Crimson Peak to see that kind of approach and that kind of love being put into what looks like a really gorgeous movie. It does look. The visuals in the trailer have me so excited.
I do love him for his monster aspect of everything. Because I don't consider him really a horror director,
right?
Because he just has this weird. It's like a weird supernatural monster. Did he do Pacific Rim? Yeah, and that was I thought was
but that's kind of a break for him from his typical fare.
It's still a monster, giant monster.
It is a giant monster,
and the thing I want to see him do.
And the thing about Del Toro, and this actually explains a lot. I just thought about this. He is a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan, which I think explains a lot with his style. Which H.P. Lovecraft is certainly horror, but it's not horror in the way that maybe we think about it now.
It's classical.
And kind of honestly, Hellboy, I see a lot of that sort of H.P. Lovecraftian influence. In fact, there's on the Hellboy glove that he's summoned with, there's like references to all the Cthulhu mythos monsters, Yog-Sothoth, and all those different things. And he's just filled those movies with references to Lovecraft and that whole universe, because I think in his mind, Hellboy is being brought from Lovecraft's universe into the world, and so that kind of stuff. So that does kind of, and even looking at Pacific Rim, you can kind of see some Lovecraftian stuff.
Definitely.
And Crimson Peak, now that I think about it, really does feel like a Lovecraft thing when you look at the trailer.
And Clive Barker, they have the same. Yeah, it's very Lovecraft, which is pretty great, but it is like a whole different classical style of horror films.
Have you read Damnation Game, Clive Barker? I haven't either. I bought it forever ago because it was like his debut book, and I hear it's phenomenal. I mean, like on his debut book, he has quotes from I think Neil Gaiman and Stephen King saying that it's like the best debut horror novel since like Lovecraft.
Yeah.
But I still haven't read it. I was just curious if you would.
I will have to though, because I do love some good horror genres novels. Mostly Marquis de Sade is the most disturbing person on earth, but boy does he know how to write disturbing too. So,
So kind of bringing it full circle, Cliff and I we're both directors who kind of lean more towards dramas and comedies.
Right.
And I think a large part of our audience are young aspiring filmmakers who are trying to find their voice, trying to find their genre, trying to find their thing. Why should we or anybody else who's listening to this consider horror as a platform for us to direct and for us to express our art form in?
That is a good question, which I tell people a lot. If you are getting into film, horror movies are the best way to go to get your start. And so many great horror directors that we know now have done this whole thing. Steven Spielberg, even, his first movie was a made-for-TV horror film. James Cameron, James Gunn. My favorite thing to tell any fans of Lord of the Rings is, oh yeah, Peter Jackson used to be a good director when he made Dead Alive and Bad Taste, because he started in horror.
What about Heavenly Creatures? That was Jackson, right?
That was Jackson.
Yeah, I didn't see that one.
I've heard it's a beautiful film.
I'm sure it is. Yeah, he doesn't do much wrong.
Yeah.
Besides Lord of the Rings.
How can you say Lord of the Rings is long? Just our last episode on I guess it's a few episodes ago now, when we did adaptations, it was ranked our number one book to film adaptation.
Yeah, I just, you know.
Well,
Is it because he stopped directing horror?
It's a fantasy. Yeah, I was kind of like mad about.
Well, Jeremiah is also the guy who's like, yeah, monsters and ghosts and all that stuff, but if you give me a wizard, I don't buy it.
Oh yeah, I hate wizards. Yeah, give me sci-fi or horror.
Okay, so back to.
And one of my favorite examples is Bob Clark, who did what everyone knows as The Christmas Story. You know that movie, the kid gets his tongue stuck. The movie he made first was called Black Christmas, and it was the most crude, like, just weird film ever. Is about basically like a serial killer Santa dude, and the dialogue in it. I don't know how anybody looked at this film and was like, you know what? Let's give him like one of the best good feeling Christmas movies of all time. But they knew, and the reason why I'm bringing all this up is because I think they get their start in horror film because you don't have to take yourself that seriously, and the best ones don't. And I'll use Sam Raimi as probably the prime example because he became famous because of horror films lead you to low budget, and you can do a lot with horror films, and because it says you're low budget, you're usually using your friends for your first movie, which always happens. And if you can direct them to make them good actors, that's showing more on your skills. And if you can make that emotion strong enough, because fear is one of the strongest emotions, you know, if you could really pull that out in a low budget film, you're doing great as well. And just like your effects, if it just gives you everything.
It's kind of a training ground.
It is, yeah. You can pull out elements from each like director's first horror film, and you can see that in their later films, and it's like why you could see them giving like Sam Raimi, why he gotta go on and shoot like the Spider-Man. Well, whichever one of those Spider-Man movies, 1 and 2.
All of them.
Yeah. You never know. There's so many of those. But for everyone.
And there's about to be more.
Yeah. And even like James Gunn, his first horror film was for a very low production studio called Troma, which just do the rudest, grossest humor of horror films. But then he went on to make Scooby-Doo. The movie
Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, and Guardians of the Galaxy lately, and it's because they can see this in these horror films because it's so hard to make a good horror film, with a low budget, unless if you're just smart about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you plan it out well, like a good director would, and you know how to really coach your actors, then you can make it one of the best, and that's why some of my favorite horror films are some of those directors' like first films. And you can see it in everything they do. So it's really just a way of like trying to break yourself in and give yourself like show that what you can do, and people know that it's horror film. This is just fun and it's low budget.
Right.
But I bet I can see why if we gave them money and talented actors, how they could knock it out of the park.
So all that being said, I have one other question. This may be a good thing to end on. It's interesting, horror kind of used to be the redheaded stepchild of genre. I mean, it was genre movies, and you didn't get a whole lot of respect in that, and they didn't have mass market appeal, and so on and so forth. Occasionally, you'd have a Shining or an Exorcist break through that blew everybody's mind, and it was huge. Now, certainly a version of the horror genre. I wouldn't say it's the horror that you've necessarily been talking about, but certainly a version of the horror genre makes for some of our most popular content. The Walking Dead. Oh, yeah. I mean, The Walking Dead is building on a lot of what horror, the horror tropes and the world of horror, and now it's one of the biggest shows on television.
Paranormal Activities.
The Paranormal Activity movies, American Horror Story, a lot of our biggest stuff and our biggest movies. I mean, a lot of what Jason Blum has been doing with everything from Insidious to The Conjuring and all those films. I mean, these are some of the biggest moneymakers, most popular stuff out there today. What do you think that says what do you think that says when the genre that used to be kind of the bastard child is now kind of ruling the roost? What do you think that says for the art form and kind of for popularity in general? Because it seems very like a changing tide all the time.
Yeah. And I think it's I think it kind of just goes with our time. I don't think I think it'll go back to being that weird stepchild. But and I think it's because of the time, like the 90s were such a weird time for people. Everyone was like weird and grungy and stuff. It was just because they were like, everything's so good, kind of thing. And we just like rebelled in a sort of way. So like horror films being popular now is kind of it's a weird thing because people want that weird crappy feeling, but they also love personal emotion. Like YouTube is a huge thing that just happened recently, if you consider it, like 2006.
Right.
And the most famous YouTube stars are just people, not really doing a darn thing, but people love it, watching them play video games because there's emotion, and that's where they're getting it right and bringing that crowd in.
Right.
So they're bringing in that crowd who just wants a good story and drama, you know, and that's why my grandma even watches The Walking Dead, and we'll talk about it. And she hates the parts that I love. Mm-hmm. So whenever there's like a whole episode that is just them talking and Rick's all moody and talking to people's shoulders and yell Carl the whole time,
Carl,
she hates them.
Which is most episodes, to be fair.
Yeah. She loves those episodes, and I hate those. I'm looking for like, you know, the zombies or some people to attack them and get some, you know, some good action in there. But I do appreciate the character development in it. But yeah, I think it's just because. Same reason Evil Dead was good was because it wasn't just horror films and made you feel bad. Mm-hmm. It was like a comedy as well, and you liked the character, so it made you laugh, it made you scared, and it made you feel for the character. So you're getting more emotions than you would in like just a single genre, as say of comedy. You watch comedy, you just laugh. If something like sad happens, it's for like a minute, and then they break it, you know, with some more jokes. Mm-hmm. But yeah, with Walking Dead, they hit on so many different genres.
Yeah.
It felt
well, it's like you hit on earlier. The power of horror comes in a sustained experience.
Yeah.
It's not just a scare. It's a feeling of dread that carries out that actually creates an experience, like any good film or show or whatever.
And they really know how to draw out that scare for 7 to 8 episodes sometimes.
Well, this has been a really good conversation, and Jeremiah, thank you so much for joining us today. For anybody who's watching or listening, go check out Jeremiah's stuff on Amazing Studios. The video, the Halloween video is up now. It's on all of our social channels. You can find it at Amazing Studios Inc. on Facebook, Amazing Studios 1 on Twitter. You can also check out his blog that he wrote. That's amazingstudios.com is where you'll find his blog post. There's also another great blog post up that our producer wrote on how to make a bad video. And I think you actually, our animator, shot that.
Yeah.
So that should be worthwhile. So go check that out. Jeremiah, if people want to find you online, where can they find you?
In a whole? Not much online presence. You'll find me on Amazing Studios.
I know. I follow you on Instagram.
Dear Ferret is my Twitter.
Yep.
And same for Instagram.
Okay, so at Dear Ferret, like the animal?
Yep, the animal.
Well, tell you what, the next time we have you on,
The
next time we have you on, let's have a conversation about why ferret, because that sounds. I think there's a story there.
It's a wonderful story. Yeah. I've been entertained by it before.
Yeah. So the next time you're on,
Yeah.
I look forward to getting that. Also, tune back in on Friday with the release of this podcast. You'll also see us posting all day about Halloween on Friday. We've got a lot of upcoming projects that we're going to be tweeting about. So great thing that we're doing here for the town. That I can't say any more than that because we're under very strict orders not to say anything else.
An NDA the size of Texas.
Yes, it really was. It filled up this entire room, and we had to sign a million places. But once it's done, I'm excited about what it's going to be able to do and everything. So with that, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Jeremiah, thank you for being here. I'm Peter Scheibner.
And until next time, I'm Cliff Baumgartner reminding you to craft a story worth hearing.